I grew up in Detroit. I played.
Where'd you go to? Did you go to Mumford?
Mumford High School. Played basketball, so I was around a lot of people. And then when I went to law school, I couldn't stand any other classes, quite frankly, other than evidence and criminal procedure. And when I was a second year in law school, they had a clinical program at Wayne where they let you, under the supervision of a lawyer, go into court. It was just traffic court, the hookers and the petty thieves and that kind of stuff, small drugs. But it just seemed like it fit my personality, let's put it that way.
So
I
you
couldn't imagine.
immediately became a criminal defender?
Yeah, I've never done anything different. I went right from there. I got a job at the defender's office as a clerk, researching, and then when I graduated and passed the bar, I went there as a staff attorney.
Was it kind of a natural? Because I mean, just from people I talk to that speak about you, say you're just like, you're really dynamic in the courtroom, and you seem to really kind of have a magnetism with.
I think that that to an extent, trial lawyers are born rather than made. I think you're kind of born to do it, and you've got a talent for it. You can't be afraid, obviously.
But you like being in court. You like being in the.
Yeah, you have to like to be, as crazy as this sounds, you have to kind of like being the center of attention. And whether it's playing ball, I play music, playing the piano, I never mind sitting around 100 people and singing Temptation songs. You have to have a certain kind of personality to be a successful trial lawyer. And so I think some of it is learned, but a lot of it is just instinct. And your instincts come from your environment, how you were brought up, what you're used to, where you're comfortable. And most people who have a hard time with trials, they're just not comfortable in their own skin. And that shows when you're trying to talk to people that you don't know, keeping in mind, jurors, you don't know these people. If they know you, they're not sitting up there. And I just think that you, if you're lucky, like I was, you gravitate towards something that fits your personality. A lot of people are trapped working in a job that doesn't fit their personality at all, and they're stuck.
So you were coming into adulthood right at a big time of change in Detroit, early 70s, late 60s, kind of.
It was huge. It's the watershed moment of change. It changed from a city, when I was a senior in high school in 1966, the city had almost 2 million residents, and it's now shrunk to about 700,000 or 800,000. It was a time of change because up until Coleman Young's election in '73, you had white mayors and white police departments, and stress, that unit of the police department that caused a lot of havoc out in the community. Everything was changing, and you had the war, you had stress here in Detroit, you had a lot of people. The entire society was way further to the left than it is now. I mean, if my father died in 1967, if he came back to life and saw what passes for the state of the Union now, 2 wars going on, talk about internationally. Locally, the police do whatever they want. They send kids to jail for their first DUIL. I mean, just the whole idea, the whole atmosphere back then was a lot more open, and people were a lot more, I would say, liberal's not a strong enough word, a lot more radical about what they were up against. And of course, there's also the one other thing that nobody ever talks about, that David Ruffin was right. When he's saying, since I lost my baby, he said there was plenty of work and the bosses were paying. I mean, and when Coleman Young said the problem in Detroit is there's no more Dodge Main, everybody poo-pooed it because, all the white people said it was always about race with him. But that was the most accurate thing, I think, that summarizes the situation in the city today. In the 50s and the 60s, people came here, black people from the South, white people from the South, because you could work. And if you worked in the plants in those days, you had a nice car, you could provide for your family, you'd have a nice house, you could be a father and a husband or a mother and a wife, and you could live like a decent life. Now, since there's no more Dodge Main and you don't have plenty of work and the boss is paying, leads into what you're asking me about. Now you got a choice. You can go work at McDonald's or you go hustle in the streets.
That's funny. I'm using that lyric you just quoted. I got that little piece in the beginning.
That's it, man. I'm telling you. Nobody even thinks about it. I say it to people all the time. David Ruffin was he didn't write the song. Right. Smokey wrote the song, but David Ruffin was a genius. That's the summary of where we were at in 1965. There was plenty of work and the bosses were paying. And, what Henry Ford started, it took, all those years, 60 years for it to collapse, but it's collapsed, and we've not replaced it.
So when did you become a lawyer in 70?
November of 1973.
And between
It's like a year after my dad.
graduating high school and you becoming a lawyer, how did you see Detroit change itself? Or what was Detroit went from
Well,
a
you know-
thriving city to being a troubled city?
Well, it wasn't a troubled city by 1973, but obviously what changed was the riots. I mean, when the riots happened, the east side was essentially abandoned by the ethnic white people, and Northwest Detroit was essentially abandoned by the Jews. And there wasn't any reason, by the way, for either of those things to happen, in my opinion. I think it was ridiculous. It was mindless, heedless flight. And you can't ignore that because that's a huge distinction. On the one hand, it paved the way for Coleman Young to be elected, which was really, really important in 1973 because it was long past the time for some change, particularly with the police department. But the flight of the white middle class, you know, at that particular time, and it happened so quickly. I mean, Mumford High School, when I graduated, when I got there in 1963, it was probably 80% Jewish and 20% black. When I graduated in 1966, our graduating class was probably 54% Jewish and 46% black. Might have even been 50-50. My sister graduated in 1969. 3 years later, it was 90% black and 10% Jews.
Oh, Mumford was 90% black by 69?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
You know, everybody looked at the basketball team, you know, when I was there and I was the only white guy. But the school itself, we sent like 70 kids or something like that to the University of Michigan from the graduating class just of 1966 at Mumford. And within 3 years, the Jews had fled out to Southfield High. It was only Southfield High in those days. And that's another huge change that occurred. So when I was in school, I wouldn't say, I mean, the auto industry, it wasn't a problem. It really was just the change in the demographics of the city that happened between 66 and 73. And then when Coleman is elected, that's a watershed moment too because things started to change. Black people were getting jobs and were getting contracts. And, the police department, well, you could get the statistics because that was another crazy statistic.
Well, it was 5%.
I was going to say it was
5% black.
That would have been my guess. 95% white
That's what it was.
and 5%
At the time of
black.
the riot, that's what it was. And Coleman by 78, or maybe by 80, it made it almost exactly 50.
Right, and the other thing, of course, is with his election, it kind of, well, 72 there was a judicial election that provided a little bit more equality in terms of the judges. But once Coleman was elected, then black folk were elected to a lot of other positions, like judge or county commissioner and things of that
And the
nature.
fact that he ran against Nichols, who had been running Stress, and as soon as Nichols lost, he went and became sheriff of Oakland County,
Right.
and that was the sign of the vacuum to let's all move to Oakland
No,
County.
I think the vacuum. No, it was all occurring after 1967. I mean, it was July of 1967. I was a sophomore. Actually, I wasn't even yet a sophomore in college, and
You were in between your freshmen. So.
that was between my freshman and sophomore year.
Where were you guys living? Where'd you-
Same place my mother lived until 2005. One on Muirland and 7 Mile.
Oh, your mom still live there?
She lived there until she was 85, and then she moved in here because she was infirm.
Right.
Yeah, she stayed there. I grew up on Roselawn, down the street from UOD High, and then we moved on Muirland, and my mother lived in that house 50 years, something like that. Some ridiculous number of years.
Lives on Warren.
That's my neighbor.
Okay, could you?
I'm just interested in how did you develop your practice and your reputation, like to the point where by 10, 15 years into your
What was your first big drug case?
I honestly don't recall. I would say, I know when I was in the Defenders, I was assigned to represent a guy. His real name was Arnold Wright, and they called him Pretty Rick.
Pretty Rick.
Yeah.
And Pretty Rick was a pimp, is what he really was, and he was from our neighborhood. He was from around Mumford.
He
Then he became a drug dealer.
Right.
We think that he was I think that was John Sutton's informant. He was a DEA informant, I think.
If he was, I don't know anything about that. When I represented him,
Was
he had
one
no
of
money. I
Mars-
was assigned.
Was he one of Marzette's lieutenants?
Marzette was older than me. Marzette, I think, was already dead by the time.
Right when you started.
Yeah, I mean, everybody heard about the guy, but he was dead.
What
But
was the Pretty Ricky case?
it was there was an undercover purchase, but he had no money. I mean, I was working in the Defenders. It was an assigned case, but that really wasn't. I can't really say. I suppose that when I first got to be more well known was when I started representing a lot of those guys from the Pony Down gang, which is the Buttram brothers, or Leroy Buttram was supposedly the head of it. Not
Can
supposedly.
you tell us about that case and compare and contrast with the YBI and what?
The two they were identical. YBI, the only difference, YBI at least from what I can recall, they started earlier, and this whole concept of using two things that people didn't use before, which was young kids that were juveniles and taxi cabs to do the drug deals because you can't forfeit taxi cabs, although I think they eventually did.
Was Pony Down, what was the level of sophistication of them and the size versus YBI?
Pretty close to the same to me. I'd say, they had a lot of guys. I mean, I'd say for 3 or 4 years, I didn't do much that wasn't somehow affiliated with them. Somebody'd get stopped for a pistol, somebody'd get stopped with some drugs, and a lot of the other lawyers that worked around me, they were pretty active. Let's put it that way. They were very active.
What was you specifically defended Leroy?
In the federal case, but that wasn't until 1985.
Right.
I represented.
What was it like having those guys dealing with them when they come in your office? Pretty normal.
I've never had any problem dealing with anybody off the streets because they know me. They know what my background is. They know I know them, and they know I don't cheat them. And if you don't cheat people, I had a lot of fun with a lot of those guys who, by societal standards, obviously wouldn't qualify for Man of the Year award at the Kiwanis Club. But they're tough guys. They can take it when they go to jail. They're real crooks. They know that's part of it. They know you got to pay lawyers' fees. They know you got to pay bonds. They don't whine and complain. They know they did it. If you get them a great deal, or if you have a tribal case and you win it, they're appreciative. They don't, as far as I could see, they don't go straight after it's done.
What was the heart of the government's case, or how did they make the Pony Down?
Wiretaps and informants, like it is on every case. What they do is, I believe what happened, and I don't know because I wasn't working for the government, but I think with respect to YBI and Pony Down, I think it got to a point where not enough of these guys were going to jail. We were winning. I mean, Otis Culpepper was representing the YBI guys, and he was winning. Anytime they'd get they thought was a good case in state court, I would win. Same thing here. They'd bring a homicide charge, I'd win. And I think what happens is the feds, they're the court of last resort. They're the law enforcement arm of last resort for good reason. They got the resources. They've got the system in place, and they've got time. See, everybody criticizes the state and the prosecutor's offices and the local police, but they have to respond to every little thing that happens. If you're a policeman in the city of Detroit, at any time, it doesn't have to be now, there's B&Es going on, cars get stolen, a cat's in the tree. The DEA doesn't have to worry about B&Es and stolen cars and cats in trees. And they can sit and they can wait. The statute of limitations is 5 years, and it keeps being extended as long as the people are still involved. And they're all still involved because they're crooks. So it's natural that they would take over these kinds of cases.
So you see that the Pony Down case really made your reputation?
No, I have no idea. Honest to God, Scott, I do not know. My guess is when people ask me that, especially young lawyers that they say they want to do what I do, I tell them you can't. You're not going to be able to. And they think it means because I think I'm the world's greatest lawyer. It's not that. The combination of circumstances that produced someone like me don't exist anymore. Nobody is growing up on Roselawn, going to Mumford, playing basketball, make all city in Detroit, and everybody knows you because you're the only white guy. I mean, I had a built-in advantage. Everybody knew me because it wasn't that my center was a lot better than me, but I remember Fishman. Yeah, the white guy, the left-handed guy. So I had a built-in advantage. And then the other advantage you have that most of the youth don't have, the youth in the streets now are so hardcore that they can't go to law school. They can't graduate high school half the time. And these suburban kids, they don't know. So how are you going to get guys like you're asking me about to trust them? I've never had a retainer agreement. I never had a contract with anybody. I never ask anybody to sign. I tell them this is the fee. They pay or they don't pay, And other lawyers can't believe it. I got examined today. I have to testify in a case. This guy's talking to me like I'm on from Mars. You mean you don't have a retainer agreement? Do you? I don't bother with that stuff. You must not trust your clients. But people like that. And so I think that, I don't think it was any one case. The street talks loud and quickly. You just can't imagine how quickly word goes in the streets because they're not doing anything else.
A outgrowth of what?
It's interesting that you asked me that because I've had numerous conversations with people from all walks of life, from policemen to judges to street guys to whatever. My honest opinion is that when they start talking about drug problems, it's kind of, you already said it. If you really, really were serious, you want to stop the American public from using drugs, you'd have to lock up all the users. I've never had a case, nor has anybody else I know of, nor have I ever heard of a case where a dope dealer walked up to a junkie, pointed a gun at him and said, "You better buy these drugs or I'm going to kill you." It's the opposite. It's the users that make, I mean, it's the ridiculousness, for instance, of prohibiting marijuana. When you have ordinary people, who all of us know, even people my age, still smoking weed, who are doctors and lawyers and regular people, if the public doesn't think it's bad, then what business do we have? How are you ever going to stop it? You're never going to convince people that marijuana is bad when such a large percentage of the public have smoked it in their life and are all got families and jobs and going to the gym. You know, it's never affected anybody.
So during that YBI and Maserati Rick era, I mean, socially, the use of especially cocaine was just...
Well, but there was, cocaine had become an acceptable drug, but the explosion, the real explosion occurred when crack cocaine, and they called it freebase, whatever they wanted to call it. Because that was, it was just destroyed people. I mean, just destroyed them. You know, a guy'd go from a healthy guy, like how Scott looks now, and you'd see a guy 6 months later, the guy weighed 115. I mean, literally, with the sunken eyes, no color in their face. You know, it just, that created a whole new market. And that created, the danger there was what the damage it was doing to the user. You know, even the heroin guys. I mean, when I started as a lawyer, heroin was still pretty much the drug, you know, in the 70s. You know, these guys, you could tell them, they'd come in court, they'd be sitting in the back row, if their case didn't call quick enough, the cops, the court cops, were always told by all the judges, don't lock them up, just make sure they don't fall asleep. They go over, hey man, oh, I'm sorry. They'd sit back up, and then, you know, but that's what it did to them. Crack cocaine was an entirely different animal.
Tell us about Demetrius and Maserati Rick.
Demetrius Holloway and Rick Carter, even though they were friends, were as different as two human beings could ever be. Demetrius Holloway, had he wanted to be, could have been a CEO of a major corporation. He never drank. He never smoked. He laughed at people who used drugs. He was smart as hell. And he was cunning in a good way and in a bad way. But he was cunning in a good way, like Bill Davidson probably was to build Guardian Industries. And he was a leader. See, a lot of these guys they lead in the wrong way and they lead in the wrong business. But that personality trait, if they were in the military, they'd be a guy who would become an officer. Demetrius Holloway would have been an officer in the military. If he went to a regular business and started working, he'd come up with a better idea about how to do certain things. He was a leader of other human beings, and he'd wound up as a manager or a boss.
What the government alleged, and do you think this is true, that he was possibly at one point the largest drug dealer in Detroit?
I have no
Those
idea.
type of things,
You got to remember, as a lawyer, I mean, there are some lawyers that get a little too close to the fellas and they actually know. We don't really know. I mean, he was a big, big whale, is what the cops used to call him. But was this guy bigger than that guy? The guy on 7 Mile, the guy at Mac and Bewick, who knows?
Did you get the feeling that Demetrius and Rick were...
What was
their
Rick like?
relationship?
I honestly don't. Rick was the opposite. Rick was cheap and petty. I mean, he was all right to deal with, but he wasn't all right to deal. He was a pain in the ass, is what he was. And he liked to flaunt stuff, you know, and walk around like he was a big shot, which in a sense he was, I guess. But it was apples and oranges, him and Demetrius. Anybody will tell you that. Anybody in the streets will tell you that.
That's right.
But they knew each other from childhood.
Oh yeah, they grew up together. I'm saying they were close. I mean, I don't know if they were close because I wasn't with them, you know, away from.
But they at least knew each other.
Oh yeah, they were. It was. I used to say to Meech all the time, Jesus Christ, did you guys live down the same street? What'd you have, a different kind of water in your house than
What
Rick?
street? Do you know what street those guys were?
I think they lived in the Brewster Projects. I think Demetrius came up in the Brewster Project. That's what I think. I don't know. His mother worked for the post office.
What cases did you do for Demetrius?
Every case he got from the day Demetrius Holloway walked in my office in 85. He died in 90, probably 85.
Right,
He walked in. I was still in the Lafayette building. He said he had a Fed case, felon in possession. He had just gotten out on
I was
bond,
going to say he just got out.
and he had just got out of jail, out of prison, federal prison.
Yeah, because he got out in 85.
And he had just got out on bond, and he came in and he said, look, I'm going to try this case. I've got a defense, which he did. I don't have any money, hardly. You know, I've got, some $500, whatever it was he had. But my word's good. He says, you tell me the fee. It'll take me some time, but I'll pay the fee. And he was, at the time, literally had just gotten out of jail on federal parole. And there was something about the guy, I can't remember if it was drugs or breaking into boxcars. I can't remember. I don't think it was drugs. I'm almost positive it wasn't drugs.
So he got, in 85 when he got out, he was not at that point a drug kingpin.
He was nobody. I'm telling you, he didn't have anything. He had $1,000 or $500, and there was something about the guy I thought he was telling the truth. And it was a tribal case, and I'm a sucker for trials. And I said, okay, we got a deal. And of course, this jackass examining me today would say, and you didn't have a fee agreement? I said, yeah, we had a fee agreement. We shook hands. And we tried the case, and he was found not guilty, Judge Woods. And he did exactly what he said he would do. He brought in, and then he paid the fee. And then as time went on, he only had, he had a little misdemeanor case, which was just literally cussing in front of kids, so I wouldn't even call that a case. That's just a ticket. He had one other drug case where the Detroit police planted some drugs out. There was no, I proved it. The jury was out 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Where, you remember where that was at?
Yeah, it was in, where the heck was he driving? It was near downtown. I think he was coming from his mother's. You know, I can't remember. We had the map too, because we used the map to show how full of shit they were. We had the map. We had so much evidence. It was unbelievable. And later on, I found out it was true that they planted it. Well, the facts were pretty obvious. By this time, he's Demetrius Holloway Whale. And they claim he's driving down the road. I think it was down by the Fox. They followed him a ways, maybe on Bagley. I think, yeah, he was coming from the projects and was somewhere around over there. And they claimed he had like an 8-ball on him. Now, this is a guy who doesn't use drugs, which I know for sure. He's a whale. What whale is driving around with it? Or it might have been heroin. 12 dime bags of heroin or something like that. It was some ridiculous. Now, of course, you can't really defend. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this guy is a whale. He has kilos. But we did get out that they knew. You know, this was still when there was recorder's court too, so you had a more streetwise jury. They knew he was somebody to the police because that was part of the defense. It had to be. Because when people want to use the defense, the police planted it. The first question anybody asked, including me, why? Well, there was a why. This was Demetrius Holloway. And that they were out 10 minutes, literally. And let him go. That's the only other case. They were working on a federal case when he got killed.
What did you think when he got?
Were you shocked?
Okay.
I mean, other than
When
the
you
shock,
heard he was killed at the Broadway, what did you?
I'll never forget where I was at the gas station. This is before cell phones. And I got a message from Joe Swickert, who still writes for the Free Press. And he was covering the courts at that time. And I called him back from the payphone. This was how long ago it was. And he tells me that he got killed at the Broadway. And I knew he went to the Broadway all the time. Obviously, so did the killers. What did I think? I thought within 2 hours. Certainly by the next day, I knew who did it and why, but
Milton
I'm not going to say. Oh, well, if you say so, yeah.
Well, that's who.
But nobody knew. They chased their tails on that case for what, 15 years?
yeah, they didn't.
Everybody in the street knew who did it, and everybody knew who ordered it, and everybody knew why it happened.
Who ordered it?
I'm not talking on that. They know, though. They know. They know for sure.
I mean, is it somebody that's around or?
He's alive, but they know.
Oh, Ed, Big Ed or something.
No. It had nothing to do with him.
Did you have ever cross paths with Big Ed?
Never once. He and Demetrius, at least anecdotally, were at war all the time.
In Maserati.
Well, Rick was dead. Yeah, because Ed sent the guy to kill him supposedly, right in a hospital.
What case did you do for Maserati?
Pistol case outside the skating rink over there on the east side, because he was the east side guy.
Didn't you say he gave you a leather jacket or something?
Yeah, a coat, because he owed me money. I won the case, and that's why I say it was cheap. It was it was a pistol case. He probably owed like $3,000 or something like that, and the damn guy would not pay. And it was always, I'll see you next week. So I typed up a motion to withdraw. He had another case pending, and I typed up a motion to withdraw. And I called the guy in that was from the east side. I said, take this thing. I wasn't filing it, but I said, tape this thing to the walls and the windows, like at the bars, everywhere on the east side, so people can see what a cheapskate Rick is. And the guy went out, and about 2 days later, man, what are you doing? I said, well, shit, you won't come in and bring me the money? And he brought me a leather coat instead, which was fine. But
Paid you the leather coat.
he might have brought the money and a coat. Maybe that's what he did. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But I gave the motion. The guy said, go hang this up on the east side somewhere. We'll see. I'll get his attention.
Yeah, let's. Okay, yeah. White boy Rick.
Never.
But can you just give a
I never represented him. I can tell you this.
just give a little take on the
Sure.
whole situation?
You talk about Frank Usher. Why did everybody care about him? Because he was Frank Nitti. If Rick Wershey would have been anything other than white, Hungarian, Egyptian, black for sure, nobody had ever heard of him. The fact of the matter was, it was so novel to the media, to the public that here was this white kid that was in Detroit and was supposed to be this big, huge kingpin. Well, I mean, he was 17 years old. I don't know, like I don't know whether Meach was this or so-and-so was that. There's no damn way white boy Rick, or Rick Wershey, was the biggest drug guy in Detroit at the age of 7. It's ridiculous. But he was a captive of his nickname, and then he was a creature of his environment in the sense that when he went to trial, this whole entourage of assholes show up, with their pants on backwards, and not like they go now where their ass sticks out of their pants, but, it's just obvious it's a bunch of crooks, and they sit in the courtroom, and the jury sees this. And the fact that he's still in jail is obscene, having nothing to do with, I understand he cooperated, whether he did or he didn't. The fact that that kid is still in jail, these 25 years later, is obscene. Because whatever he was a kid. He was just a kid. And nobody ever charged him with murder. And I don't ever remember anybody saying he tried to kill anyone or he killed somebody. I remember somebody say he drove a Jeep to a front door of a house once because somebody owed him money. I thought it was kind of funny. But I mean, life in prison for this kid, it's ridiculous. He's a poster child for what was wrong with that statute. 17-year-old kid. Kingpin in Detroit. If you were talking about in Tawas, okay, but what 17-year-old white kid is running the whole world here in the city of Detroit?
17-year-old period.
You better have been a bad 17-year-old if you're.
If you read snitching and how people that are still working as criminals are telling on other people in law enforcement, and it's all a melange of.
There's no harder job than to be a narcotics officer and try to make decisions as to who do you deal with, who don't you deal with, who's bad, who's worse, who's not so bad. And what happens is, as a matter of necessity, because they have supervisors, particularly in the Detroit Police Department, you've got to execute X number of search warrants a week or it's your ass. The feds, we've got to get, it's not quite as bad in terms of rush, but they put them in a position where they don't have any choice other than to make deals with people. And I've found over time that very often, guys whose reputation in the street is, they never tell, they all do life, they all walk on nails with no shoes on. They have been, but they don't really tell, they don't come in and testify. They just give information, let's say, about people they don't like or people they're at war with. And it's one of the vagaries of being involved in these kinds of cases. Unfortunately, if the good cops would let the judge who's signing a search warrant or would let the prosecutor on the case know that, hey, the guy told us X, Y, and Z, but keep in mind, he hates that guy. But the bad cops, they won't even tell who it is that they get the information from. They'll just say, oh, yeah, we know that Bernstein and his crew are going to be on Mendota, and Margarita, and we can go get them. So when you say, guys, we're playing both sides of the street, a lot of guys do that. And you don't find out about it, at least as the lawyer. You never find out about it unless, A, that guy gets in trouble. And now he says, geez, we can use this. I've been helping for the last 5 years, which I've been representing the guy, didn't know. Or you find out about it when the guy eventually has to testify against someone and decides to do it. Then you say, oh, okay.
When you were repping Johnny, was that the time that Rick had already started dating Kathy?
Again, it was none of my business. Johnny got locked up. I mean, I'm pretty sure he wasn't dating her while
what I heard
Johnny was out. But Johnny got locked up.
Yeah, what I heard was within 3 or 4 days of him getting locked up, Kathy was down over the...
I can't say anything, and I wouldn't even if I knew, but I don't know anything specific about anything like that, but I can tell you that historically, women who are associated with dope guys tend to be associated with more than one, and they tend to be associated on a serial basis depending on either the life expectancy of the dope guy or when he goes off to prison. That I can tell you.
Can you tell us in depth about your work on the Best Friends case and Nate Kraft, whatever you want to go?
I didn't really know much of anything about the Best Friends other than that they were supposed to be a bunch of killers on the east side. And I knew I represented a guy who, at least from what he said, and anecdotally, they were always at odds with the Best Friends, and this guy was a very tough guy, and he's still alive, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he was a very, very tough guy off the east side. So I knew who they were. When 2 or 3 of the Brown brothers were still alive, somebody called me and asked me to represent a guy in a felonious assault case out in Harper Woods, I think, and I was on the way there and had to stop, and I met them. This guy must have been one of the best friends. So that's the first. I didn't know they were called the best friends. I just knew they were some evil-looking guys. The Browns really were. They were tough guys genuinely, and they looked. They had that look when you look at them, you didn't see nothing either. Kind of like Campbell. I didn't have anything really more to do with them. I represented Reggie Brown twice.
Oh, you represented Ragged Ray.
I represented him on an assault intent to murder that involved, I think it was the same guy I'd represented on the other one, and we won that case. Then I represented him on a homicide case where he killed one person, and the other person he thought he killed, but the guy lived.
The Roussel hit?
Roussel, that's his name, Stephen Roussel.
Can you tell us?
That was White Boy Rick's brand.
Exactly.
Can you tell us about that?
I can just tell you that Roussel lived, and he testified.
No, Roussel died.
Then the other guy lived. You're right, Patrick McLean?
McLean.
Something like that.
What is it that supposedly happened?
Reggie was driving down the street on the east side. He saw that he'd been looking for Roussel. Roussel was driving himself. Reggie Brown started chasing him in the car. Roussel fled in the car, jumped out of the car, ran in the house. The other guy, Patrick, was lying on the couch asleep, if I'm not mistaken. Small town. And because the street talks so quickly and so loudly, if you get a reputation as, you got to be a good lawyer, obviously. But mostly what people are looking for, it sounds crazy when you're a crook. What crooks are looking for is somebody to treat them fairly. Just treat them fairly. They know they're crooks. They don't expect you to take them to your house for dinner and nominate them for your synagogue. But they just want to be treated fairly. And I think that's really, if you go out in the streets and ask people, I mean, I certainly am no touchy-feely type of guy. I'm not the kind that can sit around and, Oprah with you. It's not that. They're going to say, well, the guy's a good lawyer. He knows everybody, and he knows the streets, and he knows us, and he's fair with us. I think that's what it is.
Can you take us through what you feel comfortable talking about, the Frank Usher case, about what he was convicted of, and then what the real story was and how you got it?
Well, I wasn't there, so I don't know what the real story was, but the long and the short of it was there were 3 people who got murdered at the Democratic Club, and that was not a political organization over there off of Woodward. And the notoriety of the case came because their heads were cut off and the bodies were found. And of course, if it had just been 3 dead people, they'd have said, oh, there's 3 dead people. But when you cut somebody's heads off, then of course it became the crime of the century. I was younger than I am younger than those guys. I didn't have anything to do with the original trial. Usher was convicted as being an aider and abetter. Nobody claimed he shot the people. And he was basically there. They were all there. Well, let me not get ahead of myself. So he was convicted. He was doing a mandatory life sentence. His people came to me. I got a new trial based on, I can't even remember, I think it was a faulty jury instruction or something like that. At the time, he was also doing a fairly lengthy federal sentence for drugs because they had a conspiracy case there. I think it was 15 or 17, but it was before the guidelines, so the actual time wasn't as much. So I got him a new trial, and we tried the case, and the evidence really was almost next to none. The case against Frank Usher was he was Frank Nitti. And if you're Frank Nitti, you're guilty. I think that the evidence showed that he was a target. I think it showed that somebody was trying to have him done, probably Doc Holliday, who's now dead, and that Frank, either by force of personality, quick talking, or luck, got to the sideline rather than be one of the victims. And that's what I kind of think. But I think because he was Frank Usher, forget Frank. Nobody ever called him Frank Usher, other than in court. It was always Frank Nitti, Frank Nitti, Frank Nitti, because you got to remember in our day we all grew up watching The Untouchables on Thursday nights, 9:30, and Frank Nitti was everybody'd imitate those guys, and so Frank Nitti was the big thing.
What was he like on a personal level?
Frank Usher is one of the easiest clients I've ever dealt with. I'm still friendly with him to this day. He's been out many, many years. And I had a drink with him 3 months ago. He's a gentleman. If you didn't know he was Frank Nitti, if people didn't say, oh, Frank Nitti, and you saw him at a ball game or in a bar, he doesn't curse, he doesn't smoke, he drinks, but he was a very easy guy to deal with. He didn't pretend to be the lawyer, even though he had, like anybody when you're doing time, had people showing him stuff and all that stuff, but he knew he was the client, and basically he was an easy guy to deal with.
Does he look at you like you saved my life?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask him that. I don't know about that. I do know that the day I saw him, I was having a drink with another guy who happens to be a client and a friend of mine, and he and his friend walked by, And he doesn't live in Detroit, doesn't live in the Detroit area anymore. And when he walked by, I say to this guy, I said, I think that's Frank Usher. This guy didn't know. Then, of course, I saw it's Frank. Oh, Frank Nitti. And the guy immediately got a little. So he walked by and sat down, and I kept my head down. And I said, yeah, boy, it's amazing how guys just walk in, don't even speak to the guy who saved their ass. And then he looks up and he sees me. He comes over, he gives us a drink and all that. But,
So who was Robert Lefty Partee?
Lefty is some kind. I don't know him at all. Never met him.
Or what was his supposed role?
Well, according to what the prosecutor claimed, Partee is some kind of kin to Frank. If I'm not mistaken, a cousin or something. But it might be a play cousin. I'm not sure. But I think they're kin of some sort. According to the testimony, what the prosecutor's theory was that Partee and Red Freeman killed the people. I mean, they were supposed to be the killers. They were according to the prosecutor's theory. And the jury convicted Partee, and he's doing life. Another jury acquitted Red Freeman, and he's doing life on another case now.
Who was Red Freeman in the sort of Detroit underworld scene?
I knew him very briefly, but what did people say? I mean, people said he was a hitman. That's what they always said.
What about Chester Campbell?
I met Chester Campbell once in my life. Chester Campbell was not a guy I would want to spend a lot of time in a closed place with.
The DE agent said, and this guy worked undercover in South America, every city in the United States. He said Chester Campbell was the only guy that scared him.
I met him one time. He was thinking of hiring a lawyer to do something I don't even remember. And I went to see him in the county jail. And the county jail, the old county, it's a really small little area. And he wasn't going to try to strangle you or anything like that. He wasn't really that imposing in terms of physically. But when you looked at him, you're looking at him like I'm looking at you, and you don't see nothing. You just look, those eyes. He was very, very smart. And he fancied himself to be, I don't think just a jailhouse lawyer, but a lawyer, which is why I told him as we were sitting there, I said, I don't like to get involved in, which is the truth. It had nothing to do with who he was. I just don't get involved with people who think they know more than me, half as much as me, or they think they're lawyers.
Play lawyer.
Yeah, I've told guys, not Chester Campbell, I've told guys in a trial where the guy will lean across and, man, you ought to do such and such. I said, oh, really? I said, do I tell you how to sell dope? The guy says, no. I said, well, then don't tell me how to try a case. There was a federal indictment. I represented Johnny before the federal indictment on, again, pistol case, and I think they claimed he had another time where it was a plant. They said maybe he was the one with the 8-ball, Johnny Curry, right? Supposed to be this multi-kilo dealer. That case got dismissed. We tried another one, I think, a state court case, and then they got indicted in federal court in the mid-'80s, I want to say.
It was like 87.
87, because the Pony guys were gone in 85. Yeah, 87. And they had it was the usual federal case. They had wiretaps, good wiretaps that killed us. They had a lot of different identified informants, and the reason I know who they were is because we were assigned to Judge Sir Heinrich for trial. Bob Mann represented Leo, and I represented Johnny, and I think Wyman Jenkins was on the case. There might have been 4 defendants left. Everybody else had pled.
Yeah, Wyman Jenkins was
Yeah, I think Wyman was there. And literally, as the jury was coming down, so we had all the discovery because we were getting ready to start the trial. And we went in the back for a conference. Wayne Pratt was the prosecutor, and he had been offering X, and we wanted Y, and we weren't that far apart. And Judge Sir Heinrich, to his credit, he didn't get in the middle of the sentence bargaining because they don't let you stupidly in federal court. But he was a great civil defense lawyer, so he knew about negotiating, and he said a few things that kind of made it obvious that we ought to split the difference here, and we did, and that's why I can tell you for sure that Rick Wershey had nothing to do with that case. Now, what he might have done behind the scenes, I don't know, but
He had nothing to do with it.
I think he was still out then, though, because he was going with Kathy.
He was what Al's referring to is a situation. Purcell was sleeping, Pat was sitting.
Then it was whatever the hell it was. Roussel was sleeping?
Yeah.
Then it was Pat he was chasing. He was chasing somebody. He ran in the house behind the other guy, shot Roussel dead, shot the other guy, thought he was dead, and the guy lived. And I can tell you from experience, not just this case, the hardest case there is when you think you killed somebody and the guy lives and identifies you. It's kind of tough to figure out why would he be pointing the finger at you, if it didn't do it. So he got convicted, and Judge Crocker gave him life.
What was Rocket Ridge like in his personal life? Just another client.
He was a very, very tough, dangerous guy, just like his brother. I didn't know the other two, but Boogaloo, same way. They were tough guys, and they were
Did you wreck Boogaloo at all?
No, he was dead by the time. When the best friends got indicted in federal court, I represented Thomas Carr.
Who
Kale,
was Thomas Carr?
just one of their guys.
What was he charged with?
Everything, homicides, everything. I mean, everybody. They had about 45 or 50 dead people in this trial. And
Is that the most kind of murderous conspiracy case you're aware of?
certainly the most dead bodies I've ever had, where they actually charged it and tried to. They only tried to prove, I think, and did prove because the jury found them guilty of them, maybe 7 or 8. But when you would cross-examine the witnesses, well, that was when so and so Walter Daniels got killed on Gratiot. You know, it would be like your dog ran in front of a car. I mean, it was just talking about murder was like talking about catching a cold.
Didn't they open up on Walter Daniels in the middle of Eastland?
Oh heck, that's the case. That's the case I represent. That was
Walter Daniels.
He's dead. He was a dope dealer on the east side. That's the case I represented, Reggie, on where I won.
Eastland opened up.
Oh, can you tell us?
They were found not guilty. I can't remember. Daniels testified.
Well,
he
no,
was.
talk about how it was in the middle of Eastland.
That's what they said. It was in the middle of Eastland. They were looking for the guy. They found him and they start shooting. I think they were shooting in the
Mall.
in the mall itself, not in the store, but yeah, right in the mall. People were going crazy.
Yeah.
These guys were, they were something.
that?
The best friends.
The Brown brothers.
It was
They
one
were
Brown.
shooting
One
in
Brown.
Eastland?
Yeah, they
That's
shot.
nuts.
Well, they were pretty nuts.
So you represented Rock and Reggie for he's
the-
doing life now, right?
The case he's doing life on, I represent. Now, of course, he's got a concurrent sentence from the
He's
federal
back in
case
the
too.
state prison system now.
Oh, they put him back in there? But I represent him on that Eastland shooting. And we won it. I think it was the Eastland shooting. I know if I didn't represent him, I represented the other guy that was shooting. There were 2 or 3, maybe 2 shooting.
What happened with Thomas Carr?
He got convicted of everything, and then the next thing I heard, he cooperated, and he's out. He got a sentence reduction, and he got Rule 35, they call it. And he cooperated, and
Okay.
I know he's out. Yeah. So
And when you represent him, he was convicted of life sentence stuff.
hell yeah, he was convicted of a murder he didn't do. I'm convinced he didn't do it. But the jury, I mean, you got regular people sitting there, and all these dead people, and I mean, it was just an impossible case. Interesting case, but impossible.
What was it? What was interesting?
Well, just the cast of characters. They brought in Charles Wilkes, and he admitted to 15 homicides, 12. And they gave him like a 15-year cop. He's out.
He was on
Lock your doors and windows. He's out.
the Gangland episode that I was on. He was on.
Yeah, he's out there.
Were they were also involved? There was drug dealing allegedly.
That's what they said. But in all honesty, the case itself, they had money. It sounded like. I think they found some money, and they must have had some drugs involved because, I mean, I know people pay to have people killed, but not the kind of money to support a whole gang. But I never had a drug case that involved anybody that was supposed to be a best friend.
Oh, so
Shooting, it was always shooting.
the best friends conspiracy case was really just a murder case.
In my opinion, they talked about there were drug counts in there. There were times where they caught a guy with, but I don't remember it ever being kilos. A guy to have an ounce or something. But yeah, it was a murder case. It was a mass murder case, is what it was.
So Rack and Reg and his brother and all them, they almost kind of are beyond being just drug world enforcers. These were.
They were just hired killers, I think. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, it's all stems, I think, from the underworld, whether you call it the drug world or whatever.
These guys were more maniac. They probably would have been killing people even outside.
They were just they were cold guys. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things where you wonder. I met the father. I met the mother. You just wonder what
were the parents like?
Father worked in the factory his whole life. Mother was regular, normal citizen. It's one of those things where you wonder what the hell was in their oatmeal.
Can you comment on this? What's interesting to me, a lot of these guys, Demetrius sounds like, and what you just said, did not come from super horrible poverty-stricken. They were black, working or middle class, and the kids became.
I'm a firm believer. Just like when you asked me about trial lawyers and how do people become that. I mean, in the nature-nurture discussion, nurture means something. There's no doubt about it. But nature means more. Kobe Bryant was a great player, whether he was living in Italy or wherever he was. And I think it happens too. I think, the liberal way to look at it is to say that every kid is a good kid. Everybody's salvageable. It's just a matter of their environment. If you put them all in a kibbutz and raise them, like they do in the kibbutzim, then everybody will be a good kid. But that's not true. There's people who get raised in the kibbutz who are shitheads. They're just,
Did Nate Kraft testify? Did you see him?
Nathaniel Kraft testified in the best friend's case. He sat up there, he's a huge guy with the bald head, and he really needed to be on TV in one of those detective or police movies because he played the role of the tough guy and the big hitman and the this and that. It was laughable, honestly, to me. He scared the shit out of a couple of the lawyers. I could tell that. But when I read one of his, they give you the interviews, obviously, because you're going to cross-examine him. And when I read that he claimed in one of his interviews that he killed Demetrius Holloway, I knew that he may very well have killed all the people he said he did. But if he told the police that, then he's a liar. And there's nothing he says. I can't take it to the bank or anything if he made a stupid statement like that.
You know that's a lie.
I knew it 6 hours after the homicide happened, so I certainly knew it by the time I read that.
What did he have to say?
Honestly, I don't remember. He claimed he was a hitman for the best friends, and he killed this guy or he killed that guy. He was, at the time, I think he was making a living going around testifying of all the people he killed, and I did it because this guy. And he was smart. He's a smart guy. He's not stupid at all. And he's cunning, and I got the feeling, honestly, when I say it was like on TV, like he was promoting his book already, that he's going to write sometimes to try to get you guys to sign on to co-sign, as we say in the streets.
Well, he's interesting because in any of these I've found from talking to all different kind of. I mean, the police have their own truth. Each guy has their own truth. It's very difficult. I'm sure you experience in these cases. What really happened? You really never. It's hard to really figure out.
Well, if you're a lawyer and you really, really know what really happened, it means you're too close to the defendants. You just take. The only reason I have that feeling about Nate is literally because of that statement, that claim.
But he must have certainly been involved in some.
Oh, I'm sure. Look, he basically was advertising. If you want someone killed, call me. I mean, that's basically what his testimony was. And it almost was sounding like, although I think he was still locked up then. I mean, he was playing the role. Maybe it is his role. I mean, maybe that is what he is. But I just got the feeling he may be a killer. He may be a tough guy, claimed to be some kind of martial artist, if I'm not mistaken. And he's a huge guy. He may be all of those things, but I felt that he was beyond all that a con man. That's what I thought.
Or in addition to.
I'm saying, no, yeah, whatever else he was, but he was a con man. And he was selling a story. And whether 80% of it was true, or 20%, or 100%, I don't know. I know 100% wasn't true.
They kicked him out of witness protection.
Well, that's another story entirely about witness. I mean, a lot of people, street guys, they can't even be on a tether because they can't stay in a house at night. They're like owls. They call me up begging to get off a tether. I said, what the fuck do you have to do between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. that's so goddamn important? Man, it's nighttime. I mean, so I can see why Nate Kraft didn't make it in witness protection. Sammy the Bull didn't make it in witness protection.
What is your opinion on the legacy of both kind of the drug culture of America, but in Detroit and its negative impacts on the city?
Well, there's two things to me that are obvious. Number one, the number of people that use and then become unproductive. I mean, that's a huge drag on the city. But really over and above that, the number of people, like I kind of alluded to briefly before, who really, had they chosen a different path, could have really been contributing members of the society and of the city. And that's really the saddest thing to me about the whole drug culture. When I see these, and it's males and females, because for every male that gets involved in the actual drug stuff, he attracts a young girl who's an A student who's on her way to the University of Michigan, who decides it's more important to have a fucking Range Rover than it is to get a degree from Michigan, and winds up getting involved and ruining her life, and then they have a kid or two. The snowball effect of there not being a real economy in this city that drives kids who are smart and who are leaders and who could have made something of themselves, and by the time they're 19 or 20, they've ruined their life. That's the overriding legacy of the drug culture in the city of Detroit, in my opinion. It's easy to just throw this in. See, people in the suburbs and Republicans and people who like to just shit on black folk, it's easy for them to just say, oh, these are just a bunch of assholes. They do this anyway. Some crooks are crooks and would be crooks, but because of the lack of feasible alternatives to the local kid, a lot of kids who would do other things, who would have gone to school, who would have, if they grew up with me, they'd have gone to Mumford. They might have still been tough guys, but they'd have gone and got to either go to police department, they'd have gone to plant, they might have gone to community college, they might have gone to college. That's what the real thing. It's too easy to just say, oh, they're just a bunch of assholes anyway. To 18 years, mind you. You know, you're talking about 216 months. Mr. Lewis, do you have anything to say? And it was packed, I remember, that for us. There was a civil trial, you know, all these white lawyers with their million briefcases and their gophers and there's crap all over the place and they're arguing over property or something like that. They asked Mr. Lewis, you have anything to say? No, sir, other than I want to thank the court. Thanks to Ms. Turbush. You all treated me very fairly. And Judge Cohn looked like, what? I just got 18 years, but that was the truth. It was a fair deal. He'd been out there a long time, had a nice run.
What did you represent him when he was 18?
He had a case when he was 18. I met him. He was already, I got him a new trial. He had been convicted. No, I take that back. I represented him at his sentencing. He was a kid. And some older guy, you know, had a bunch of drugs and he wound up getting stuck with, this was back when the law was 20 to 30.
Is he like in his 30s?
Yeah, he is, I'll tell you exactly how old he is. Right now he's probably 38 maybe. Because I remember us discussing how old he would be when he would get out if we made this deal. And he'll be in his 50s when he gets out, which I always told him, look, I'm 60. Well, I wasn't 60 then, and I'm still having fun, so you'll have plenty of time to have fun when you get out. Yeah, I represented him on that case, and the judge gave him I shouldn't say a break. He accurately looked at what his role was in the offense, and he did 3 years, and then he came home.
Back in the early 90s.
He was 18 years old. I think he's born 72, probably 90, something like that. And then I knew him, you know, I always knew him. I think we had a gun case. Once he owned a couple of bars. And
What bars?
I can't remember
Was
the
he
names.
living out in West Bloomfield?
I think he had different places at different, that's not unusual. I mean, a lot of guys
No,
have.
I know.
They have a place to get away from all this craziness.
No, I
Canton, a lot of guys live in Canton
I
now.
was going to say that something
No one lives in Detroit.
New Year's Eve, going into 2000, you know, we had this big party out in West Bloomfield. 100 people, 50 couples. They had a big condo, they had a whole thing catered, and we all paid whatever we paid. And of the 100 people, there were probably 99 black people and me. Of the 50 couples. And after New Year's came in, and we're sitting around, and of course, we start talking about the city, and geez, isn't it awful? And all of us grew up in, there were a couple from out of town, but most of them grew up in the city, and they were going through these reasons like we've been doing. Well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, you know, oh, white flight, blah, 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 white flight. I said, wait a minute. I said, we got 100 people there, right? 99 black people, right? How many live in the city of Detroit? Out of the 50 couples, 6. I said, what are you talking about? That's what's killing the city. You know, when you leave it when the schools are bad, anybody that can afford to go somewhere else goes somewhere else.
I mean, me and him are lifetime Detroiters and both have had our own tangencies with the criminal justice system, and I don't think Detroit's dying. I think Detroit's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the anthropomorphism of it, you know, people being attached to these cities, and a city is just a municipal entity. It's not a living human being, and I think we're beating our heads against the wall trying to revitalize something.
I
that's
can't
just
say I
not.
disagree with you.